So a few weeks ago, I released my first ever video on Midnight Motorist, and not only did it provide a new perspective on one of the biggest mysteries of this franchise, but it also left us wondering how it actually affects the rest of the story. Today, my goal is to tie up all the loose ends, revisit some plot points, and explore the story even further. So in case you haven't seen part 1 yet, you can watch it right here to catch up, as this video will seem very confusing without that context. Previously, I theorized that the crying child was secretly one of William Afton's victims this whole time, a victim of a severely drunk and reckless father. But one of the main claims I made about the timeline is that the FNAF 4 experiment chambers came first, and this is mainly because of two reasons. We learn from Didophobia, these experiments rely on visual hallucinations to study levels of fear. And throughout FNAF 4, we notice that all of the crying child's fears from the minigames stem from everything he experiences in the experiments. Whenever he's startled by his brother's jump scare, the same noise carries over to Foxy in the closet. His fear of being caught by Fredbear stems from what we witness in the gameplay. And the experiments offer an explanation to why William would even keep tabs on his child in the first place, to manipulate him and keep his secrets safe. Not only does this give a huge motive for Dave to be the one you should not have killed, but it's also a bit poetic. The series basically starts the same way it ends. The main point I'm trying to make here is that William had a fascination with scientific discovery from the start, and this would make sense, as the experiments were all about studying behavior through observations. He simply just hadn't reached the point of committing murder yet. It's something that actually has decent backing for Fazbear Frights. In the story 1:35 AM, we learn about a scientist named Phineas Taggart who is studying the effects of negative human emotions. You see, in this universe there's this urban legend that spirits tend to haunt objects upon death, due to their emotions attaching to that object. Phineas had interest in scavenging these haunted items at auctions, like medieval torture devices, in order to further research this concept. Dr. Taggart is also responsible for bringing life to the Stitch Wraith, a reappearing creature in this series who is often considered to share characteristics with Golden Freddy. But what's significant about Taggart is he was able to study emotion without having to kill anyone. He simply just started researching it on his own accord. In Afton's case, his experiments on fear would be the origin story for his research before he outsourced his work into killer robots, before any attempts of bringing things to life. William is like a mad scientist, and the crying child was his lab rat, and in a twisted way, his motivation to torture his son was all in the effort of scientific development, a notion that can be further proven by the Curse of Dreadbear DLC. Dreadbear is practically inspired by Frankenstein's monster, and Frankenstein's story is all about a mad scientist who brings an unorthodox creature to life. But Frankenstein's monster is constantly rejected, feeling like an outcast to society. This causes the monster to feel vengeful towards his creator. Dreadbear is supposed to represent the crying child. He looms over the FNAF 4 house. One of his minigames involves brain surgery, and there are tons of references to Midnight Motorist and Halloween in the DLC. Dreadbear also emerges from a red lake, which directly connects to the one you should not have killed, drowning in Old Man Consequence's pond. I didn't even realize that in the trailer, Dreadbear emerges from the ground, almost as if he came to life after being buried in the middle of the woods. And it's because the child is actually buried in the suit. He was stuffed in there by William, a shot in the dark that he pulled off once he finally got drunk enough to do it. This helps us build a narrative of what follows Midnight Motorist. After the crying child was buried, he possessed the suit, rose out of the ground like a zombie, and then traveled back to the restaurant, similar to what we see Golden Freddy do in the FNAF movie. This would explain how Cassidy was stuffed in the same suit years later during the missing children's incident, allowing both spirits to reach the Golden Freddy suit. But what's crazy to think about is that nobody even knew that Dave's murder happened. Not even William. And like everyone else, the police investigation would have written it off as just a runaway situation. Not only did Dave's disappearance escape the radar of the police, but also the public eye. Henry thought the first wound was inflicted on him because, to Henry's knowledge, his daughter was the first victim. And while Charlotte's murder was publicly affiliated with the restaurant, Dave's disappearance was not. They were pretty much killed back to back, and not a single person even had any way of knowing. This narrative is what makes Michael's character arc so meaningful. He initially started as a bully, but the bite incident completely traumatized him, causing him to become more sensitive and concerned for Dave. And once his brother went missing on his watch, it only made him feel worse. He was distracted by the TV that night, and like the FNAF movie, this burden created an obsession in him to find out who killed his brother. This is what leads into Michael stumbling across dreams through the perspective of his brother. And while this may initially seem confusing, it's actually something we've seen before. In the FNAF 2 ending night cutscenes, sequences that are actually labeled as dreams in the game files. The FNAF 2 night guard, Jeremy Fitzgerald, experiences dreams through the eyes of Gabriel, the kid who possesses Freddy. These spirits have the ability to influence and share their own memories through the dreams of the visiting night guards, which is why we see Mike relive a memory from his brother that occurred all the way back in 1983. The next topic I want to discuss is Elizabeth. For the record, I do think it's intentional. She is missing from both FNAF 4 and Midnight Motorist, but I don't think that suddenly proves she's dead either. So the next option I thought to consider is custody. Maybe Afton doesn't have proper custody of Elizabeth, and this is something that has decent evidence backing it. In the FNAF movie, Mike's younger sister Abby is stuck in the middle of a custody battle between Mike and Aunt Jane. The Help Wanted tapes also generate a story where Vanessa's parents are stuck in a custody battle too, and her father got custody by convincing Vanessa to make up lies. So what if there was an ongoing custody battle between William and Elizabeth's mother? And as a temporary court order, William got his sons, while the mother got her daughter. It's genuinely possible that William tricked Elizabeth to lie in this case, and as an incentive, he promised to make her own animatronic.
There's something very important that I've learned how to do over time. How to pretend. Do you ever play make-believe? Pretend to be one way when you are really the other.
And by the opening of Circus Baby's Pizza World, Afton won the case, likely receiving full custody of Elizabeth. Now, let's go back to FNAF 4. In the last video, I mentioned how Night 6 felt like a disguise to cover up what we actually needed to see, leaving the opportunity open for Scott to get away with the lead-off. But there is something we need to seriously consider here. What if the bite of 83 was just a frontal lobe injury? This was seemingly implied by Scott a few years ago when he responded to a post named "Scott is the bite victim." And we can even tell he's referring to the bite of 83 because it mentions this phrase. Of course, it's possible that this is just a mistake, or maybe it's just all part of the joke. But let's consider the possibility that it isn't, because if this was what Scott intended, then the existence of this pizza simulator lawsuit makes a lot of sense. A child's head was bitten by an animatronic. Although his frontal lobe remained connected to his head, doctors aren't sure how long it will stay that way. This could be Scott's attempt to go on the record and clarify, hey, just because a bite looks like this doesn't mean it isn't a frontal lobe injury, as the 8-bit graphics may have not done it enough justice, since we see every other bite in this franchise has been a frontal lobe injury. And as we know from FNAF 1,
it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe.
And this allows me to segue into my next topic. How does FNAF World fit into all of this? I mean, this game has a reputation for being one of the most confusing and questionably canon entries of the series, and for good reason too. Certain endings just get too meta for their own good, but this shouldn't take away from the fact that World still ties itself into the story of the previous entries. As soon as the game opens, we are greeted by a familiar voice, the Fredbear plushie from FNAF 4. He reveals to us that we are in a sanctuary, a place separate from the outside world. This is seemingly validated by the map itself, resembling the shape of a brain. We are in the subconscious of the crying child, and it's in this place where we are instructed to set up clues that mirror the minigames from FNAF 3, revealing that these minigames are being created from the child's mind as well. Not only do Dave's old memories seep into the environment, like elements from the FNAF 4 minigames and his time in the experiment chambers, but there's also a full recreation of Junior's, a place that he had memories running off to after the traumatic injury of the bite incident. And 5 Lab supports this. The crying child needs to be running off to Junior's to witness these masks, because in the Fazbear Hills course from FNAF World, they reappear as a memory in his brain, just like in Happiest Day. But we can even take this a step further. It's all being orchestrated by William. In the Dreadbear DLC, one of the minigames you're tasked with involves giving Dreadbear a brain transplant, and you perform this procedure by adjusting vitals and physically color-coding Dreadbear's brain, almost to appear like the brain from FNAF World. And this is what I think is really going on here. Once William discovered that his son possessed Fredbear, he dissected and surgically operated on his brain. William is responsible for the creation of the Happiest Day minigames, something that he even seems to admit in the novels when Charlotte confronts him about it. The children's souls are still here. You imprisoned them. They are home with me, their happiest day, playing and happy and having their eternal best day ever. Happiest Day is a fake paradise, a trap implanted in his son's mind that not only alters the perception of Dave's dreams, but lures the other kids into them, creating a place where even more children can remain eternally oblivious, overloaded with happiness and fun. We know from the FNAF movie, these children have the ability to enter people's dreams, even seeing them attempt to lure Mike into a false memory.
This isn't real.
But it could be.
This is actually something that happens to a kid named Jake in the novels as well. Jake's heart was full of happiness. There were smiling faces all around him, soon to be stuffed with cake and ice cream. But wait, none of it was real. It wasn't even a memory. Jake needed to wake up. He wasn't safe where he was in real life, and this dream had lured him into a false sense of security. And yet it was tempting to stay where he was now, where everything felt so happy and cozy. These missing children have all been deceived by Dave's sanctuary, and to get the good ending, it is your job as the puppet to reverse engineer it, to glitch out of the minigames, ignore the exit doors, and help the kids escape from their prisons once and for all. If a spirit truly wants to move on, they need to recreate a real happy memory. In the novels, Jake's real happiest day was a memory of being at a baseball game with his father. The MCI's real happiest day is when Charlotte recreates the memory of their birthday party. But what's the happiest day for the crying child? Well, if you go down to the deepest part of his subconscious, you'll find the memory of the spot he was murdered, the bad memory that William has tried to suppress. And once the crying child decides to finally accept his fate and move on, he reaches his real happiest day memory. Because guess what the title of the minigame is in Ultimate Custom Night? Your own happiest day. As drowning in the lake gets you the same trophy in FNAF World, watching TV with his brother and his father. The reason it has me convinced comes from the short story Hide and Seek. Toby always felt left out when his older brother and father bond over watching TV together, something that his brother even calls him out for. This was a happy memory for Dave because it meant the world when he was included and appreciated by his family for once. Even though the crying child was a vengeful spirit, it was only a means to an end, because the sad reality of it is, the father who's responsible for his worst memory is also responsible for his best. You see, the box has always been that one thing that has driven everyone to uncertainty. But this time, it almost seems like the last piece of the puzzle we've been waiting for. Some things are best left forgotten. William forgetting the murder of his own son. The rest of the child's story became a forgotten memory, because just like William, we as the audience are effectively left in the dark as well. We only get to see the aftermath, the crime scene, from the perspective of the person who forgot, and it's up to us to figure out what to remember.